Zach, welcome to Career Tea Podcast. I'm excited to have you on today. I think your journey and experiences, but also your personal experiences outside of professional work, it's going to be insightful to our viewers and listeners today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. So I usually, start with asking people what they studied undergrad, but I kind of want to go a little bit differently here, and I want to ask what you do now. What's your title, where you work, and then we can start to see how you got here from beginning of your journey. So go ahead and share what's your job title now and where do you work?
Yeah, so I'm a customer success manager, and I work at HighSpot. It's like a late stage startup based out of Seattle.
Got it. What does HighSpot do?
We do sales enablement.
Okay.
It's like a software, but we do sales enablement, and my role in that is kind of a mixture of business and technology, is being able to work with customers, B2B customers, and then be able to like understand the technology behind it, understand how to strategize and make sure they're successful.
Yeah. Got it. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into it in a little bit. But so now I want to kind of get an outlook on where you started, right? I want to know where you grew up, and then where how you decided where you want to go for undergrad, and what you decided to major in. Because, a lot of people kind of go into college undecided. They don't know what they want to study. They might go, undecided, or just choose something random, right? And I decide to change it in the first year or two. So I want to know, how did you choose your college and what you wanted to study?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I went and grew up in Dansville, New York, which is like 40 minutes south of Rochester, New York. And I went to the Rochester Institute of Technology. So leading up to that, I think in maybe my second or third year of high school, I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew I needed to get scholarships to go there. So I needed to work really hard for that. And the Rochester Institute of Technology had this really good scholarship program, and it was in the business school. I think I like technology, but I'm not a coder. I don't really love that side of things. And I do like the person-to-person relationships. So I was like, hey, I think marketing is a good place to go into. So I'm like, I know it's going to be business, and I know it's going to be something in that. So I started in marketing, and within a couple years, or I think it was within the first year or two, understood that the graduating majors of management information systems always was graduating with like a higher paying career job. And management information systems is a very good mix of business and technology. So you're kind of the middle person to be able to understand the technology to a certain degree and be able to communicate and convey that to people who don't really understand it as much. So I signed up as a double major. So I got into, it was not just marketing, it was like new media marketing, essentially a lot more analytical, and had a lot of, like at the time it was like Facebook was pretty big, and like doing Facebook ad campaigns, things like that. So had to kind of pivot a little bit, but they worked really well together because I like kind of see myself as having a personal brand, but also like having the technology side because they couple together.
Right. That makes sense. And, when you talk about like you kind of went into marketing, and that was in the beginning of like Facebook when they started kind of tapping into that marketing side. At that time, I feel like marketing was kind of newish, I guess, area of career. Did you ever have doubts of like, should I go towards marketing? Is there career opportunities? Because nowadays marketing's huge because of all the social media that's out there. So at the time, did you ever have like second thoughts, like, should I come out of marketing? Or because of that kind of dual with MIS, you were like, no, this is a good mix?
Yeah, I thought marketing was a good like foundation, and in business, I didn't really know what to do. And it was like, I think there's like accounting. I'm like, I don't really love that. There's just management, which just seemed too broad. And like, you'll get managerial experience and you can get management experience. But marketing just seems like something I could go to and like, and just stepping stone to something else.
Yeah.
I think the only thing is like when I started taking some of like the search engine optimization courses, I was like, marketing is changing so fast that it's like you can never keep up with it.
Yeah.
And in the past, it was like, oh, you had ads in like a magazine, or you had newspaper, or billboards,
TV, radio.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But now it's just everything moves so fast, and you can't keep up with it.
Right.
Even if you figure out how Facebook works or Instagram or TikTok works, like it'll change like in an instant.
Fast, yeah.
So I liked a little bit more stability, and it's good to know those things, like how fast things change. But I think the stability side comes more from understanding technology even though it's changing fast, like the people skills you get in like management information systems was really good and kind of like paired well.
Yeah. I think like you kind of like when, you were studying marketing at the perfect time. It was like in the beginning. So you kind of were like, you jumped on it. So as you went through like your years at RAT, tell me a little bit about your experience at RAT, right? What kind of like, did you feel like there was good growth opportunity there to kind of set you up for a career? Sometimes people start doubting like the schools they're in. What were some of the factors that, RAT provided for you that kind of made you think like, yeah, this is the right school for me. It's the right program for me. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think like I've heard that their MIS program is ranked pretty high in the nation as well. Correct?
Yeah, I think it's like top 10 or top 6 or something at a certain point.
Which I'm sure that has a lot of impact on like, you wanting to be in that program, because if you want to get jobs afterwards, employers are like, okay, they come from this program. It's ranked high. It's probably valued more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like one of the biggest factors in making a decision about a school was obviously when you graduate, what are you going to be like? How successful are you in finding a job? RIT had a really high percentage of that. The other portion, like which was probably 80% of my decision, other than like the scholarships that I was getting, was the co-op program. So mandatory 6 months of working before you graduate, and you can't graduate without that. So what was cool though, because like you start going to these co-ops and they're paying you, and then maybe you're getting like housing stipend, and then you're working with all these people, and then you end your internship. So like the first 6 months I did my co-op, I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So I just kept doing them because you could test out your career in like so many different facets.
Yeah.
So like I did a marketing, a strategy, a research internship. I did like a startup with a friend that counted.
Yeah.
And then I did like a couple other ones. So I graduated with like 2 years of experience, and like that becomes very easy to get a job after because you've already been working in a career.
You've been a student and you've had like almost quote unquote professional experience.
Exactly.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I know like a lot of colleges, I don't think it's like a thing with every college, like having mandatory like co-op or internship experience, but seeing that RAT kind of requires that, it almost like forces everybody not to be lazy. It's like you have to do it to graduate. And if you do a half decent job, I feel like on any internship, you'll have some chance of, getting a full-time after that. But if you did a good job, I think they kind of almost like set you on the right path, and it's up to you if you do like good work or not.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you did 3 internships while you were at RT, and you were part of a startup with a friend.
Yeah, I think it was more than 3. So I worked at a company called Intuit.
Okay.
They do like TurboTax, SurveyMonkey. Yeah, they're pretty big.
That's where I do my taxes from.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody loves them. But I started as a 6-month co-op. I think it was a program management co-op, and then I came back the following 2 summers. One was for research, and then one was for I think just general marketing. I also worked at a company called Zendo, which did like smart home application devices, and then I worked. My first internship was at a modeling agency. I wasn't a model, thank God.
Was it financial modeling or actual modeling?
Actual modeling. Okay. It was Wilhelmina Models in Rochester, but it was like free or unpaid, and I worked there like 3 days a week as like a marketing intern. But that was my first year of freshman college, and I was working at Auntie Anne's to like just get the gas money to go up
make some money,
like do a free internship. But I was hustling hard because I'm like, if you do this now, the next 3 summers are going to be all paid. Yeah. And if you do it right. So luckily it panned out pretty well for me.
So your internships at Intuit, Intuit's a huge company. Like I said, like I mainly know them from TurboTax. I always around tax time, I see their commercials every day. And so I like doing my taxes there. But after you did your first internship, I want to know how you acquired that first one. Because I'm assuming that first one kind of led to you be able to get the second and third one. Sometimes it's hard to get a second internship with the same company, but you went back for a second time and a third time. So tell me about how you acquired that first time, and then what was your transition, and how did you get the second and third internship there?
Yeah, great question. So that internship, the only reason I got that was because I already had previous experience. So I think I got that internship my second year of like the winter time. So I started there. I had about 1.5 years of schooling, and I had previous experience at the modeling agency because I was willing to work for free for like a little bit. And like, you really don't have skills when you're that young.
Yeah.
So like,
you just have to show that you can work. And
exactly.
You're willing to work.
So you have to be willing to like put in those hours for something, and then that's going to build on it later, which is I think important. But what I did to get that internship, so we had a career fair at our school, and it's massive. Like the whole auditorium is filled up with like probably 100 companies, if not more, probably a bit more. But I knew they had that internship because I did pre-research. So before any company is coming, they're giving an outline of what they're looking for typically. And I knew that what they were looking for. I had friends that were already in that internship in the years prior, and they kind of gave me some advice on how to get that internship. And so like day one, I showed up with my resume and essentially was the first in line, ready to go, like full suit. Like I went the whole 9 yards because like the effort that you put in matters.
Yeah.
And whether it's your paperwork for applying to college or getting your first internship or getting your first real job, like all of the things matter and you need to put effort into it.
Yeah.
So I showed up ready to go, just on my game, and was ready to prepare for exactly like what was going to happen in that conversation with the recruiter. And you only get like 30 seconds with them. So it's like, hey, here's my resume. This is the 10 things I do. So you got to practice that elevator pitch. You have to practice how you present yourself. You have to feel confident, look confident. And all of those things matter. So then after I got the internship, which was like, I didn't expect to get it. Usually people are getting it in their like third year.
Right. You got after a year and a half.
Yeah. So I was just going for it. And luckily I had someone who had, I think took a chance on me. She's like, okay, I think you're going to do well in this. Like, let's try it out. And it worked. And by noon of that day, like they called me. So the last 4 hours of the recruiting fair, they weren't even looking for that role anymore. That had already
so
filled.
They filled it with you.
So on those days, I would actually take off any classes. I'm like, you have to prioritize what matters. And what matters right now is finding a job. This is what you're going to school for. And even though I'm like a straight A student and I'm like always grinding, I'll skip classes because this is what's the next. This is why I'm at school.
Right.
So that was when I got the internship. And then while I was there, like you have to make sure that you're making the right connections and setting yourself up for success for future internships or like a full-time offer. And you do that by meeting people. So use that networking that you have. Don't just like do your job and stay in your little silo. Like you have to go out and you have to put yourself out there. And while I was putting myself out there, I met this other guy in the marketing department, and he kind of took me under his wing. He was like, hey, I like what you're doing, and like maybe we can come back next year for marketing. And I was like, yeah, let's go. I have that degree as well. Like, yeah, we're going for it. So he brought me back, and then the following year was just kind of the same thing.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And you know, again, I feel like every episode I'm emphasizing on how important networking is. And again, here you mentioned how like you network, you make connections, and if you make a good impact on people and they enjoy working with you, why not? They're gonna be like, hey, like come back, apply to this role, apply to that role. They want you to come back again. Tell me a little bit about what the day-to-day and like the work experience is like at Intuit as an intern. Whether in one of the internships or like overall.
Yeah, so at Intuit, they actually have a really robust. Yeah, I can start over too.
That's fine. You can continue.
Okay. So at Intuit, they actually have a really robust co-op program. So internships and what they call cooperative education, maybe co-op, has a really robust program. So what that looks like is it's 6 months long. At least the first one was. And in that 6 months, you have 3 or 4 months of like just the regular work. And then you take about 2 weeks, maybe a week to do in what they call, it was like they call it Coachella, but it was like a hackathon.
Music festival.
Exactly. Yeah. Play on that. But they did this like experience where you go in and like you understand how a startup works. Because in that culture of Intuit, it's very startup driven, even though it's an older company. They consider themselves trying to reinvent and like take themselves out of a job in all of their aspects of their business because they want to keep innovating. They don't want to get stagnant.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool week. And the day-to-day, honestly, it differs on each of the teams. So the first time I was in program management, we were releasing this program called Jira. And it's kind of how you track bugs and issues on your teams and how you plan to work on your team. So while I was there, I was kind of tasked with putting together like a rollout plan and then working with the teams to make sure that they understood. So there's a lot of like educational things that we were doing, a lot of trainings. And then when we rolled it out, you have to make sure everything's going well, and you have to kind of track the status of that. So it's cool. They gave us a lot of autonomy and how we handle the internship.
Yeah.
And they actually have us do real work, and they used us as an employee. And a lot of other places like might not actually use you as a real employee. They're like, oh, that's Zach, he's the intern, and we just have him go walk around sometimes and bring coffee. Like that was the modeling agency. I was like getting coffee and pizza for them and like doing maybe a couple slides. So Intuit was like straight with what you were doing, so you're getting experience so that when you graduated you actually knew what you were doing.
I've heard people like talk about their internship experiences, and I kind of feel like the experience that you had, like, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but did it impact like, you know, finding out what you want to do full time just because of how much like it felt like real work? Because like sometimes internships, they just feel like you're there as an intern, like you said, but getting an experience like that where you actually kind of get to be in it and feel like you're an employee, did that help you kind of become more clear about what you want after graduating?
Yeah, it did. I would say like I think the ability to test out multiple like different career paths, like whether it's marketing or program management, that's important. And I think when you're given the work, to your question of like you're actually doing work, then you kind of know what you're going to be doing when you graduate, and that like helps you at least solidify the understanding of I want to work in this industry, or I want to work in tech, or I want to work in this other company. So yeah, I would say.
What were the other? You said you did one more internship and the startup. Let's touch base on what those two were also. I'm sure Intuit seems like it probably was like the bulk of your internship experience, but what was your other internship and the startup that you were a part of?
Yeah, so this other internship that I had, actually like I kind of made it for myself. So there's this, when I was younger, there's this guy, we had like a connection through this weird way. So like, long story short, there was a product that was coming out and I really liked the product, and like I had written the company like a handwritten letter when I was like young, and I was like, I love this and it's really cool. And then I like made, it was on like an iPhone case, and I made the letter look like an iPhone case and like with his design on it. So I sent it to him, and then he actually sent back like $200 worth of products for my iPod. Wow. And he's like, I really like the fact that you reached out, and he like framed the letter because it was like one of his first fan mails, I guess. So 10 years later, or maybe 15 years later, I reach out to him on LinkedIn, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for internships, and like, I don't know if you remember me, but you sent me this whole package when I was like really little. It made a big impact, and like how you can have really cool connections with your customers. And at the time, it was probably a small company of a few people that were designing these things. So I didn't realize it was going to get to the actual guy who owned the company. So long story short, reached out to him when I got to college. He was like, hey, yeah, we have teams that are working right now. If you want to come down to Florida, we'll show you around what we're doing. And then if you're excited about it, we'll find out something you could do. So I was like, hell yeah, let's go. So I flew down to Florida, worked with his team for like a week, and just understood what he did. And they were doing smart home devices and anything from like thermostats to like sensors and things like that. So it was really cool because when I went down there, I like worked with him from morning, like 8 a.m. to like midnight, because this guy was just going hard, like starting his business.
Mindset.
And he had a lot of funding, and I'm like, this is fun. This is cool. We get to like talk about products and like be in this innovative space. And after that, I was like, hey, like I'd love to do an internship or love to work with you in some regard. And he's like, cool, well, we're going to Shenzhen, China next month. Wow. Do you want to come? And I was like,
oh my God.
I was like, yeah, of course. And at the time I was still in college, so I had to tell my teachers and stuff. I was like, I'm going to China for 2 weeks on this internship thing. Whatever work you need to get, like whatever I need to get done in class, like, is it okay if I do it later? And they're like, yeah, sure. Because you have like an opportunity. This is what you're here for. So
it's almost like an internship abroad.
Exactly. Yeah. So he put me up in hotels. Like we got food, paid for everything, like as if I was an employee coming with him. And that was like a very transformational experience. Wow. Because I'm with this team of founders who are like driving this business and bringing me to all the shops, or all of like the factories with, they're going to have some procurement, or they're going to work with some factories. So they're like doing some
Right.
relationship building, and like they would bring me out to dinner. So I got to see like how it operates at that higher level, to understand what the thought process was, understand how deep you need to go when you're like setting up a business. And so that was really cool. I ended up working for them for a couple more months, like remotely while I was in school.
Mhm.
Ended up being like, I just like didn't have the time for it, because I was like, okay, now I do need to finish school.
Yeah.
I can't just like half-ass both things. And so he's like, yeah, that makes sense. So
Wow, that's
good.
probably one of the coolest like quote unquote internship opportunities that I've
Yeah.
heard. I mean, that just shows like you networked with him, kept that connection, and just shooting your shot, just like sending
Yeah.
a letter out there. You never know who's gonna read it and respond, and like what came from it is crazy.
Yeah.
If you didn't write that first letter, the connection wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
And you said this company was called Zendo?
Yeah, Zendo. They
Zendo.
got bought out by another company, like a parent company, and I think he worked with them for a while as like in their design department.
Got it.
But yeah, I think shooting your shot, literally, the important thing to think about is like when you're shooting your shot though, is like how can you provide value?
Yeah.
And for me, I was like young, and like technology was like part of my daily life. So working with him, I was always like giving him advice of like, oh, this is what I would do, or this is like how I interact with my apps on a daily basis. Like this is what you should do. It's not really like a take, it's a partnership.
Yeah.
So whatever you do, it's like always a partnership. Like, and if you set the expectation of that, like, hey, I want to learn, or I was willing to learn for free from him. I was like, I'll pay for my flight down there. I'll work with you for a week, and if you like what I do, then we can kind of continue this.
Yeah.
So he ended up becoming kind of a mentor to me for a couple years, and I think I'm not sure what he's doing exactly now, but it was an awesome experience.
Yeah, I
Shoot your
hope
shot.
he's doing well and giving other opportunities to students like you still.
Yeah.
So while you were at RIT, you had the internship opportunities at Intuit. You had an opportunity at Zendo. Was Zendo towards the end of your undergrad at RIT?
I think it was kind of in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
it was
then
like
you
20.
went back to Intuit probably?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Were you involved in anything else at RIT? Maybe like, some students could also take advice from it. What I mean is like extracurricular activities. Is there, because you sound like you were pretty busy with like all the internships and everything. Was there other stuff that you were a part of at RIT that kind of built your, experience as well as resume?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I was involved in like intramural soccer. I really didn't focus on fitness as much as I should have. I was grinding myself like 4 hours of sleep every day to make sure that my schooling was good, so I could graduate with a good degree, with a good GPA. GPA is important as well, but I was like throwing everything against the wall. I was involved. I helped set up the management information systems mentorship program, where I think we had like 10 or 15 people, where all of this more senior students that were in the MIS program helped freshmen kind of grow them into where they can be successful in that role. And part of that was we had a good program,
right?
Like it was ranked pretty. I think it went from like 15 down to 10 when I was there, of top MIS programs. So we wanted to make sure that continued. And the way that what would happen is like you get an internship at some of these great companies like EY or Intuit, and then you would help kind of pick who's coming next. You'd give advice to the people you've worked with and say, hey, this person, they've approached me, they've been very professional, they want to work on something really cool.
Yeah.
And again, networking.
Yeah.
And helping set up that program really gave me the ability, well, it was myself and a couple other people, but gave me the ability to like pick who could be next in the line at some of these internships. Was like helps show that the school's good, helps people like get what they want out of their career. So it was very fulfilling.
So you were one of the starters or founders of the MIS mentorship program?
Yeah, I was one of the ones that like kind of brought it back after a few years, that it wasn't like, it kind of ebbed and flowed.
Yeah.
Some people owned it. Sometimes it would tank in engagement, and then you'd bring it back a couple years later.
Yeah. I'm sure. I think so. I attended RIT as well. I'm pretty sure the mentorship is still like ongoing and it's grown pretty big. But something like that in schools, for students that are in school right now, if there is any type of mentorship program, like that's like the least effort you can put in to be part of like a community and network. You can just enter, you get a mentor, you get a group, and you kind of build your network from there. You don't really have to put too much extra effort in, to go, make that connection. You join the network and you're there.
Yeah.
So, let's say you gain towards the end of your RIT career, you've had a few internships, you've had leadership experience as well, such as the mentorship program. What's your thought process there? Now you you have to be thinking about what do you want to go into full time, what's my career path, what's your thought process there? Did that any of your internships turn into full time, or is your plan to apply to full time separately on your own?
Yeah, good question. So I was actually trying to get an intern, full time offer with Intuit. They didn't have any roles available like as I was graduating, so it didn't pan out. Interviewed for a few other companies. I think I graduated with 3 full time offers, and it was like Amazon, and then some maybe like Liberty Mutual, and then another one I can't remember. But essentially, my whole thought process on life is like you need to be looking 1 year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, planning where you want to be, and you want to be graduating with options. You don't want to have to go for the one place that gives you a job.
All right.
And like I told myself like I'm not going to rest until I have at least 2, and then 3 came from just that grind.
Yeah.
So as I was approaching graduation, I was really already setting myself up for success. And I think like by time I was like midway through my senior year, I already had at least 1 or 2 that I was excited about offers. So it made like the last couple months just like, okay, I got to grind out, finish the schooling and graduate with a good GPA. And then I can just chill for like a month before I start my job.
All that stress of like looking for a job or having a job kind of goes away.
Yeah.
A little easier. Do you remember, so you said one of them was Amazon? That do you remember what the other offers were?
No, I think one was Liberty Mutual. It was like a rotational program.
Got it.
But
you said you decided to go with Amazon.
I went with Amazon, yeah.
Do you know what kind of made you make that decision? Because Liberty Mutual is also like a big company. What was like the differentiating factor that you looked at the two and you were like, I mean, Amazon, it's probably one of the biggest, so it wasn't too hard to make that decision. But I'm wondering if there was anything specific.
Yeah, so I think I was looking at the pay, obviously, like that's a pretty big one. I think for me, you always want to graduate with a good amount of pay because that's only going to set yourself up for success, like further in your career. And I think one of them might have been somewhat comparable, but I think Amazon just has a better name you can put on your resume. And I was also I got a full-time offer for like a people manager position. So I was going in and managing like a team of like pretty senior support specialists. So it was like a people manager, and it was in operations, which I wasn't really excited about at the time, but definitely
it's a good name.
Yeah,
that goes
it's a good name.
As first job as well at college.
Exactly.
So what was the tell me a little bit about like the day-to-day work that you did at Amazon, but I also want to know how was the work environment, because over the years, since I graduated college, as I do like research and search about different companies, positions, you always hear like a mix of things about Amazon. Some people say the work environment is very cutthroat and very hard or toxic maybe. Some people say it's great. What was your experience there and what outlook you had on the work environment there?
Yeah, so I mean, Amazon's just so massive. There's so many departments, so many teams, and each one of those teams can be very different. When I was working at Amazon, I felt it was like not as cutthroat that I've heard about. Like when I was just joining, there was like an email scandal about all of the different crazy things that were going on there. But like it's intense, and it's intense for a reason. It's the way that they set up their business structure and their processes is like, they optimize for efficiency. They're looking at the future, and they're making sure that they have the right teams in place. And in operations, like that's all important because when you have with the million customers that they have, like if you're doing something that's slightly inefficient 1 million times, then that inefficiency builds up, and then you have 3 inefficiencies, and like now it's just costing like all their money. So I would say when I was working there, it wasn't that crazy. In the role that I had was interesting because I was managing a team of people, like 13 people, and they had anywhere from like 5 to 10 years of experience as like a customer service person, but now they're in this like elevated team. But they all thought that like their next level of in the company would be into my role. So when I got there, there's 13 people that are all like, oh, I should have your job. And now you have to build a relationship with them, and you have to like make sure that they're doing their job well. So everything was based on numbers, like service level agreements, and essentially like if they get a customer call, they have to answer it within a certain amount of time. what's the resolution on that,
Mm-hmm.
and like that becomes pretty stressful for them. So like I was coming in with like no experience in customer service,
Yeah.
and I didn't answer any calls. I was just managing them, but like you have to be willing to like earn trust through them and trust them to do their job correctly and,
Right.
and efficiently, and even learn from them so that you know how to speak with them and
Right.
you know how to like resolve issues.
Like you said, kind of like a transactional, like event that you learn something from them, you teach them something at the same time.
Yeah.
How long were you at Amazon for, and what prompted you to kind of go to your next job and position?
Yeah, so I was at
From
Amazon for 1 full year.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed my time there, and I met a lot of like very interesting people, but I didn't see myself like staying in that department. And I had been interviewing for consulting jobs because in college I interviewed for a few, but I didn't really get them. So when I was at Amazon, I was like, I think I really want to go back to consulting. My partner at the time, we were going back, we were trying to move to New York
Mm-hmm.
City. So I started interviewing for consulting roles and kind of just went really hard into it. Made sure that all of my applications were very well thought out and like customized to the role. And I ended up getting a job interview with consulting at EY, Ernst
Mm-hmm.
& Young, and went through all the rounds of interviews, did some remote interviews, then on-site, and then finally got to go into like the job that I wanted when I was in college. I was like, I'm going for it.
Yeah.
And it was like perfect timing.
What area of consulting did you join EY? And EY is one of the big four.
Mhm.
For those that don't know, what area do you remember? What area of consulting you were in?
Yeah, so I was in like the technology advisory program
Mhm.
and specifically working on an enterprise resource planning system called SAP. So it's this massive system, and it's what a lot of companies use to do their like, they aggregate a lot of different programs instead of having all of these like, what is it? So instead of having an expense filing report, a financial reporting all separate, like it brings them all together. They have a ton of different smaller
Got it.
platform.
And where were you at Amazon again? Like,
What-
what city was your when you were working at Amazon?
I was in Washington State.
Washington State. So then you moved to New York City,
Yeah.
one of the best cities, experience-wise.
Yeah.
So you were at EY. What was your total overall time that you were at EY?
Just about 3 years.
3 years. And during those 3 years, can you walk us through a little bit on, did you go up levels, and what's like the career growth at EY like? If you were to stay longer than 3 years, but what was your experience with career growth during those 3 years at EY?
Yeah, so during the 3 years at EY, you come in as, I think it was staff. They call it staff 1, staff 2, and then you can get staff 3 or 4. But after staff 2, you're kind of expected to go into a senior role.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's just called senior. But you have to have people advocating for your career growth and the fact that you should be promoted into that next role. So while I was there, I went into the senior role, and then after about a year of that, I went on to my current company. But consulting's great. It's very great in your early career because you get 2 years, maybe 3 years of just fast-paced expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime that you're doing anything, like everything always just seems rushed. Like you're always trying to get the client to be happy, and you're always trying to like turn around performance PowerPoint presentations and working with your partners who like own the firm to make sure that they're getting what they need. So it's very stressful, but it gives you the ability to travel, stayed at nice hotels, got food.
I'm assuming this was pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID,
all the
and then
traveling.
yeah, it was pre-COVID, and then I had about a year during COVID while I was there.
Okay. I'm assuming it all shut down. No traveling. No
did.
hotels. What was your, and last question on EY, I want to know, what was your experience of like being at a staff level versus going to senior level? How's the transition like? What's like the responsibility differences there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when you're a staff, you're really just being told what to do, how to do it, and the expectation is that you like learn through that experience to then go into a senior role or like a manager role to then know like how to teach somebody to do that. So and at the staff level, you can take like autonomy in your work. You can be like, hey, I think we should do this. But a lot of times it's like some top down perspective, because in consulting, there's like so much nuance. You're dealing with a client that you want to make sure that your team is all collective and like together. And that experience usually comes from top down, from a manager. But then as you grow, like once you get to staff 2 and then just about to become a senior, like you start taking ownership over things. So like when I first started, everyone was telling me what to do. by year like 1.5, I was taking ownership over like the project finances on the team.
Got
like
it.
the budget and how we're operating on those
Like
things.
a work stream.
Yeah, exactly. So you start taking over a work stream, and then when you're a senior, like that's bare minimum expectation. Like, okay, you're doing the work for the customer, client, and it's being done pretty well. And then I didn't really get into the manager position. I wasn't there long enough. Because
you left at like 3 years.
Yeah. But then that becomes even more ownership, and then you're delegating to like 2 or 3 seniors.
More stress.
Yeah, it's a lot of stress.
So you left at like your 3 years that you were a senior there. I want to know first, we'll get to where you went after that. But I want to know, what did you think about your experience at EY and Amazon? Which did you enjoy more looking back? Which do you think was more valuable? And if you had both opportunities coming right out of college, which one do you think you would have taken?
Yeah, I would have gone into consulting. Sure. Yeah. I think for me, like when I was in that time of my life, I was like very much go for like 100% career. And I think, Amazon provided a good experience in like people leadership. Consulting just has so many very highly intelligent, highly motivated people, especially like in New York City is proper. Like everybody just wants to be extremely successful, and they're extremely smart. So I was learning 2 or 3 times as fast in that role at EY, partially because you're also on multiple projects. So throughout the year, I was on maybe 2 or 4 projects, and you're meeting 3 times the amount of people, all very excited of what they're doing. And then when I was in the people manager position at Amazon, it was like trying to motivate people to do their job versus taking motivated people and like expanding them exponentially of what they can do.
Seems like you had more like exposure at the same time at EY to different areas, similar to like your internship at Intuit, where you get to experience different places. If you're on multiple projects, you get to see like which area you like more, what work you like more. So after you left EY after 3 years, what was your journey there after EY? What prompted the leaving EY, and where did you go to after that?
Yeah, so I really liked EY, and I wasn't like trying to leave. Like I wasn't on a interview spree. I wasn't like trying to get out, because I liked EY, and the people were smart, and the teams that I worked with were fun. And but I was approached. It was like right after COVID. There was like kind of a big tech boom, like right after COVID, because everything's online and there's so much going on. So I was approached by a couple companies, and I was like, I never turned down an opportunity to interview with a company if somebody reaches out.
Because you always got to see what's out there for you.
Exactly. Yeah. So a couple companies reached out. HighSpot was one of them. I had never heard of them. It wasn't a big brand name, and they're on the like up and up. But I was like, okay, I'll interview. So I did the interview rounds. I really wasn't expecting to get the job, and I wasn't expecting to like get paid as much as I was about to get paid. And I was a lot more nonchalant in the interview, which actually worked out in my favor, because it was like I wasn't like trying to get a job because I had no job.
You didn't seem desperate.
Yeah, I wasn't desperate. So it was just like,
you guys want me. I don't necessarily need you.
Yeah, and I'm like, this company seems cool, but like I didn't expect what they were going to give me. And so I interviewed, and like I interviewed all the way up to like the I think it was like the CTO, like one of the founders. And through that whole interview process, like I wasn't going above and beyond the interview to like understand exactly what I was doing, but I knew that if there's an opportunity, I do want to like make sure I do it right. So I like did prepare. It just wasn't as heavily as I was like trying to get out of Amazon to go to EY. So at the end of the day, ended up getting the job with HighSpot. And after I talked with a few more people in the company, I was like, okay, this is definitely the move. It's like startup, late stage, a lot of growth, and a lot of opportunity. So excited that I'm super happy I did. I think it was a really good move in the career, because it's such an early company.
You get to see all those developments and transitions with them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you start at HighSpot right after EY? Like as soon as you were EY, you just started at HighSpot after you got the job?
Yeah. So what I did was took 2 weeks off, went to Hawaii, reset. I think the time in between 2 jobs for me is like very sacred. Yeah. I'll try to push it to a month if I can, because I hate being burnt out moving on to something new and exciting. I don't want to start on like a drained part. So I always take like a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month in between jobs, and then go just recharge.
Yeah. Do you have any like extracurricular activities that you do that interest you, that you like take a part of during like your full-time work?
Yeah. So I do anything fitness related. Right now I'm running, but I do rock climbing, surfing, hiking, mountaineering, done ice climbing a couple times. Anything outdoors, you name it, like I'm on it.
To what extent, when you say like rock climbing, ice climbing, where do you do like ice climbing? Because there's no ice climbing really in New York.
Yeah.
So where have you taken like your journey with climbing and ice climbing?
Yeah, there's actually a place like a couple hours north from New York that you can go ice climbing. But I've done, so one of my big goals that I had while I made in college and finished when I was at High Spot was climbing Mount Everest.
Wow. Okay.
That was that like
is
a 6-year journey to go do that. But
that is a huge goal. When I was little, hearing like Mount Everest, it's like this crazy, mountain, the tallest mountain in the world. So how did you said you started to plan this or think about it in college? What kind of prompted you to be like, I want to climb Mount Everest? And how does somebody just start, I guess, prepping for it? And you said it took 6 years.
Yeah.
So walk me through quickly. I know it's probably a long explanation, but how do you go about those 6 years of training for it?
Yeah. So what prompted it was a mixture of a few experiences. So one was like this feeling that I'm going to be working for 40 years. And I'm like, that's a long time. And although I like working, I want to make sure like my life is exciting. So I was like, what can I do? Like, what big goal can I set? Whether it's starting a business or climbing Mount Everest or rowing across the ocean. And there was this other time when I was on an airplane with this guy, and he was very much later career, and we were chatting, and I was early, like starting my career. I was still in college, and I was asking him about his life, trying to get a perspective, like, okay, what's it like when you're 55 and you've gone through 30, 40 years of working? And I was like, so like, what, like, how do you figure out what you want to do in life? And he's like, well, in life, there's 90% of life is just bullshit. And the 10%, there's 10%. And that's like the part that really matters. And I was like, that is a terrible take on life. And if that's me when I'm 55 or 60 retiring,
sad.
I would be sad. I would be upset with myself because life like needs to be an adventure, whether it's like, you have great friends and you go out to dinners, like whether you have great family, like life shouldn't be 90% bullshit.
Yeah.
So for me, like work is a very strong portion of my life, and I make sure that I'm doing well at it. I'm like taking the moves, but you also need to have something bigger, at least in my opinion, to shoot for outside of work, or else life will turn into 90% bullshit. So those things prompted me, and then I watched a movie about this like tragedy on Everest.
Was it called like it was called Everest? It's called Everest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you next, like if you saw that movie, because like that is so scary.
Yeah.
Like you see, like, and I always wondered, like, is that realistic? Like, is that what actually happens? I mean, you hear that, unfortunately, a lot of climbers like aren't able to make it back, and accidents happen there. When I watched that movie, I was like, my God, like this is scary. Like if it's nearly, what people experience, I was like, this is like a scary experience to like do. You really got to be brave to want to like go climb the Mount Everest. So did you watch that movie before, and how did it affect, like, you watched it and you were like, yeah, I'm still gonna do it?
Yeah. No.
What did your mom like think about that? Because I'm sure your parents and your mom was probably like, no, you're not gonna do it.
Yeah. So I watched that movie actually I was flying from like Southeast Asia to do an internship in London. I watched that video on that video on that flight, and that same flight I was like, I'm gonna climb Mount Everest. Like, this is the day that I decide that I'm gonna climb Mount Everest. And it was like maybe January of 2015 or something like that, 2016. And I was like, I watched the movie, and looking back after actually doing it, the video is like pretty spot on of the actual climb. All of the views that you see are pretty realistic. And it gets intense. Like, there's moments that in my like mountaineering career, it's been very intense, and you need to have like a certain set of skills to be able to manage that. So to answer your question about my mom, she was always 100% supportive, but I'm sure she was like in the background, like praying and making sure that I was okay. So I'm sure it was unnerving as I've gone through this whole process, but she sees how much work and dedication I put in. Like when you're doing these big objectives, the majority of the objective is the planning phase. Like you got to figure out like what risks are there, how are you going to mitigate those, and through all of those plannings, like you can start mitigating risks, and you take your like 10% chance of getting injured on the way down, and you change that to like 3, because now you've like mitigated, you're on the mountain less time, you've understood the weather patterns, and so you can do all these things, and like that does take time to learn and experience, and a lot of times you're wanting to do that with professional guiding services. So I took some professional guiding services, took like wilderness first responder courses, like figure out how to assess somebody for spinal injuries, like all of these things that like come into it that translate really well into your career, actually, because like in your career things are going to happen and you want to mitigate risks, like whether it's customer churn or whatever. But so a lot of it's transferable, and like in the mountains it's the same thing. You just need to be able to communicate, have good teamwork, and like have good leadership skills, because when you do, like then you're successful and you come back safe. So
you actually answered my next question, that I was going to say, like, how do you think it has translated to like professional career, but you just answered it before I even asked. I have a couple more questions on your climb to Mount Everest that I'm curious about. How long does it take, for when you start the climb until you reach the top, and then the whole journey coming back down? How long does it take? And what's the size of the group that you're going with?
Yeah, so there's like a few ways you can climb Everest, and the majority of people go with a guided expedition. And on that trip, like it's pretty expensive because you're up there for 8 to 10 weeks sometimes.
Oh, wow.
So what happens is you fly into this little mountain town. You got to go to Nepal first, at least I did, and then you go into this mountain town. Then it's like a 4 or 5 day hike up to like base camp. Well, I think it's about 7 actually. And all the while, like the biggest thing is that your body just doesn't do well at high altitude. It doesn't have enough like red blood cells carrying oxygen to the muscles to keep you like healthy. So you're acclimatizing, which means you go up a little bit and then you wait a few days for your body to build those like red blood cells, and then you go up more to do the same thing, and then sometimes you come back down to rest so your body can recover like fully enriched in oxygen. And so because of that, it takes like 6 to 10 weeks to do it, and depending on weather windows and things. So
6 to 10 weeks to go up and
go
back
all
down.
the way up and then come back down. So getting down is the easy part.
Not
relatively
not easy, but easier than going up.
Yeah, it takes a lot less time. So to go up to the summit, I think it takes about at least 5 weeks to make sure that you can acclimatize, and then at a certain point you start taking bottled oxygen because there stops being enough oxygen to sustain yourself. That's called the death zone. So once you get to this death zone at 8,000 meters, there's people that do Everest without oxygen, and that is just not what I wanted to do.
Is that safe?
It's
because
not
like at the top, I'm sure it's like very low oxygen.
So it's safe in one regard, because if you make it up and down, then you're good, and your body, like you've trained your body to the fullest extent so that you don't need oxygen, so you can't run out of it. But a lot, like some people who pass away, they get up to a certain point, they run out of oxygen, and now their body is like not at that same level as the other person, so like they're done. Like in the death zone, if you don't have oxygen and you haven't acclimatized, you're done.
Yeah, and there's no rescue there, I'm guessing.
There's some rescue, but it's like very
hard
limited. Hard.
Last question of the Mount Everest. You said this was what year was it that you went?
2022.
2022. Okay, so a couple years ago. It was like, within the last year, last 6-7 months, I've been seeing a lot more, videos on like TikTok about people climbing Mount Everest, but it seems like it's become more popularized, I guess. Do you have a take on that? And what do you think of that? Because like back like when, you climbed it, or back when I was like young and hearing people climb Mount Everest, it seems like something not that everybody does, right? Only a select few people do, and you spend like 5-6 years preparing for it. But I see some of these videos of people climbing Mount Everest, and it's just like a long line of people, and I was like, wow, like it almost looks like a tourist attraction now. They're going up Mount Everest. So what do you think on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question I get a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I posted some TikTok videos that went viral, and people just like hate on Everest.
Yeah.
So the thing with Everest is the highest point. So like it's very commercialized.
Mm-hmm.
So all the way up to base camp, like you have these little huts and villages of people living there, and they're selling food and things like that. And Everest is unique in that mountain range, you can only climb some of these peaks like 1 week out of the year. Like the summit window to be on the summit is like 1 week, because like there's a jet stream going over the mountain range for 95% of the other portion of the year. So it opens up this window that's this amount of time, which means anybody who wants to climb Everest is climbing it in that time. So that's why you see the long lines. It's not like at any point of the year you can just go up it. And I think a lot of people have that misconception. So there's that. And then there's going to be guided companies with clients. So like for every person that wants to go up, there's probably like one or two other people that are on the mountain supporting that person, whether it's carrying like oxygen or like it's the cook at the base camp to make food. So it's been commercialized for that, like that for a while. I think now that we have social media being very present, you have smartphones that can take really good videos, and there's drone footage. It just makes it a lot more visible. And these problems have been happening since 1994. The movie Everest is actually based on a book called Up into Thin Air by John Krakauer. And he highlights the same exact things that you'd see on TikTok now that you just didn't see before because there's not good footage of it. People that are showing up to the mountain with like no experience on ice. No, they don't have crampons. They've never put on crampons. And I've seen some of that on the mountain too. It's like people show up, they just pay a pretty penny, and they get like pulled up the mountain essentially. And like I did have support, so I can't say like, oh, I did this all on my own. 100% couldn't have done it probably without some of these guides, but I showed up to the mountain 100% physically prepared as much as I could be. And these guys live up at that altitude, like pretty high in the mountains. So it's like they are a little bit more acclimatized to it, and some of them do it without oxygen. Some of them are smoking the whole way up, like cigarettes. Just
they're just used to it. They're built different.
26,000 feet, and they're just like smoking cigarettes and hanging out, and they're laughing. They're making tons of money, and like it's a dangerous sport. So, but my take on that is, like, if you can go do it, like, why not? And if you want to go and do it all self-supported and no oxygen or anything, like, go do that. That's totally fine. I mean, I was up there. It was my big goal that I was setting outside of work. And like, I was going to do whatever it takes to get up there and be safe and happy. And the most important thing is, like, for me, is the views. So I wanted to stand at the top to see the views of the sunrise coming up. And like, I got that. And if anybody wants to hate on it, then they can, like, from their couch.
I don't see how anybody could hate on it, honestly. And if they do, like, I would be very confused, because that sounds like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like I said, it's something that I watch in movies. So to meeting you and meeting somebody who's actually done it, that's pretty crazy and inspiring, I should say. To kind of, loop back around and wrap up our conversation, I want to kind of touch base and ask a couple more questions about your current job at HighSpot as a manager of customer success, correct? Can you give me a quick, I guess, insight on what your day-to-day is like there, as well as what kind of career opportunities does HighSpot provide for, the employees there?
Yeah, so as part of the customer success manager role, I have a book of business. So that's like right now it's 20 customers. And like my main objective is to make sure that we keep those customers. So pretty much we've moved into a different model where like now my pay is there's 30% variable, 60% salary. And of that 30%, if a customer doesn't renew, then part of my variable pay is like I don't get that. So I'm very motivated to make sure these customers renew. I want to get paid, and we have the opportunity to expand. So if we upsell on something, I can get more pay than I would have before. But my day-to-day job is making those customers happy with whatever we need to do, whether it's strategizing with them about the future, identifying gaps in their product knowledge and how they can do better as serving their reps. And then working with my internal teams to make sure that we're building out the right strategies. I understand the features and functionalities. So on a day-to-day basis, I have pretty good autonomy of when I have meetings. So I tell the customers, okay, I'm available from 1 to 3 p.m. this day or 9 to 5 this day. And on a day-to-day, I probably meet with between 2 and 4 customers, whether it's like 30-minute touch points. And the cool thing is they're all different industries. So I'm getting to meet people in new industries, see how everything is operating there, and then working with them on building strategy. And some customers are a lot more self-service, and we get on a call once a month and they're like, I got nothing for you. We're totally good. We're happy with what we have and we know what we're doing. And then some customers who like, they're just switched over their solution team and now they have no idea what to do in the platform. So it's like, sometimes it's like a rolling basis of high intense, a lot of hours doing a lot with customers. Sometimes it's like, oh, it's pretty slow. Like, let's see what I can do to increase my product knowledge or build a more robust success plan for this customer.
Yeah, makes sense. Looking back at your whole career and journey from undergrad, your internships, and going through your full time, what, I guess, if you could go back and change anything, is there anything that you would do differently, you would change? And what's 1 or 2 lesson versus advice that you would have for students that either want to follow your career path, want similar type of experiences, or early professionals who are in a different field and kind of want to pivot in? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first question, what would I do differently? I honestly, like my whole college experience, I really wouldn't do anything differently. Sometimes I think about this question of like, oh, if I could go back to like day 1 of college, just hit the reset button on all this work that I've done, I'd be like, heck no, because I worked my butt off and I'm like, I wouldn't want to like do that same building up again. And because I worked so hard in those early years, like now I'm seeing the fruits of that labor. So like going back, I don't really have any regrets. Studied abroad twice, traveled a lot, got internships that paid for that travel, like was constantly looking out for what's next and how do I maximize that opportunity. So like my advice, I guess, for someone coming in is college is a time where you should be maximizing every opportunity. Like you're not going to get that time back where you are so free or you have the friend group that you have to go on a trip or like it's an opportunity. And the biggest thing too, I think, is traveling. If you can do an internship or a study abroad rather, that like you work through your school, like you're going to be going and studying abroad in this country and you're going to have a lot more free time to like plan out the rest of your life and the decisions that you're having. And it's just fun. And a lot of times it's like pass or fail. So like when you get there, you don't have to worry about your grades as much. You worry about like this experience that's in front of you and how you're going to maximize getting cultural differences, learning new languages, meeting new people that will eventually become network, that they're all going to graduate and become business professionals. So now you know people in other areas. So it's just a big opportunity and don't squander it. And
I guess use that 4 years to the best of your ability. Because I can say too, like once you go into full time, your free time kind of goes away.
It does, yeah.
Definitely use that. Well, Zach, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience and your journey and giving the lessons and advice that you gave. I'm sure there's a lot of people that will listen, and maybe somebody out there is listening to this and they'll be like, okay, I'm going to climb Mount Everest now. So I'm sure you're motivating a lot of people. And once you go through your career journey more, have more experience in the future, hopefully we'll have you back on again and see how those transitions come and how you develop into different roles and different companies. We'll also share your LinkedIn and TikTok down below for people to go check it out, because you said you have climbing videos that's gone viral. So we'll share those links below as well and have people hopefully connect with you. So thank you for joining today.
Thanks for having me.